right, so the next thing I want to go over is I'm not going to teach you warps. I think that gets to a point where it take too long. But what I will do is I will give you an idea of how I went about it and showcase how I went about it. What I did was, and I think this is a tool that is really helpful for new people, is what I classify as referencing. Basically, referencing, if when I wanted to do warps, and I don't know the first thing about how to create a warp. You may understand this little piece of image here is from Palace 6, and it's the big warp area in Palace 6. That's what I used as a way to figure out how they did the warp in Zelda 2, so I could put it in other places. And referencing, I think, is something that is very important as a whole. If you want to understand how somebody did something in Shadow of Night, the easiest thing to do is put it in the editor and see how they did it. If you want to see how they did something in Winter Solstice, you put it in the editor, you see how they did it. If you want to see how they did it in something in HackJam, you do it that way. But obviously, there's hacking going on, there's extra external things that you can't produce, that you can't do. But when something is a more physical thing that is like a warp or something that they did, you can reference things to a degree. The main thing here is that when you look at it, this will give you I've drawn up a bigger portion of it right there, and then you will look at this and you'll say, okay, here's now a more bigger breakdown of how each thing works and how the pages are going from one page to the next. And this is a very important thing. Referencing, it will help you create a warp. And obviously, you have the warp in Palace 3, which doesn't have a loop. It ends, it stops here, it doesn't loop back around. That's another way to check how this works and how they've created this environment in the game. So referencing can get you a very far way. If you say, okay, enemies aren't spawning a certain way in this room, uh, in my room that I've created, how do I get them to spawn properly, or how do I get them to spawn at a certain point? They work this way in this game. Well, you can see where the vanilla game, where Zelda 2 put these heads. You may want to emulate that. You may not. There's a lot of things that are like that. Those are things that you have to keep be aware of. So that's referencing. And I didn't really go over warps because I feel like you just need to reference it. It would take too long for me to go over all of that. The next thing that I want to talk about, let's say, um, would be doors and keys. Doors and keys are you have to keep on top of doors and keys. You can't just willy nilly place doors and keys wherever you want and expect everything to work, because, as I had already previously discussed, there are clone rooms. Clone rooms can have doors in them and can have keys in them, and that's a layer of them, but you have to understand where other doors are going to be and not be. You can't just you have to do testing. So I'm not really going to go over keys and doors that much because I feel like it would be, again, it's almost, for me, it's very hard to explain that. Like, to just say, you just do this and everything will work the way you wanted it. It doesn't, you have to be very on top of it and figure out where keys are going to be, where keys aren't going to be, and all of that. That's going to take place when you're designing the game and figuring out how rooms are going to connect. And that will take work, that will take playtesting. The next thing that I want to discuss is on the same line of doors and keys is multiple items in a room. And I want to be very clear about that. This is a no-no. Do not put a one-up and a key in the same room. If you die and you only pick up the one-up, the key will despawn. If you die and you only pick up the key, the one-up will despawn. um, what you will do is start creating despawn issues, and you will be creating soft lock issues that your game, which you don't want in your game. You do not want those things in your game. The same with doors. If you put um, an item, a good reference point is Palace 3. You can despawn doors if you pick up a red jar in a room and then leave the room and come back, the door will despawn. And this happens in Palace 3, and you need to be aware of that. As an example, I had been making Winter Solstice for a very long time, and I was trying to think of different ways to do things, and I put a red jar in a room with a door. After I had gone through the game for years, I had been working on this game for so long, I just wanted to do something different somewhere. And I put a red jar in a room with a door and just left it and was like, whatever. And then through playtesting, some BGT on basically one of my playtesters found that, figured it out, and was like, oh, your door's despawning, because you can forget about those things very easily. So you got to keep that in mind. That is very important to keep in mind, that there are things that can cause despawns. There are things that can create soft locks, and you have to be aware of those things. Those are important things to be aware of. Again, play testing is crucial. Play testing in different ways is crucial. Don't just play test the room the same way every time. The last thing I want to do is just give a general breakdown of how I want to show. The last thing I want to talk about is just some general basic things where basically what I do is I use this. You can use this to move things around. There's a lot of different ways to move things around. You can move them around in here, and you can change these items to different things. So you can make them breakable blocks. There's all types of things you can do with rooms, but you have to be aware of how you are building rooms and how they are repeated and connect to other rooms. These are just the simple basic things. I hope this at least helped you with a few things. Maybe not. Maybe it's pretty bad. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. I'm trying to get it to not be too long. I hope this does help. Thank you.